Okay, so ready to dive into all these best of 2024 lists.
Yeah.
Every year I get so excited to see what made the cut, but I gotta admit, it's a little overwhelming sometimes.
I hear ya. It feels like every corner of pop culture just explodes this time of year. Movies, music books, all the must-sees and must-reads. It's a lot.
Right. It's like, where do you even begin? And that's where I'm hoping you can help us out, help us make sense of it, sort through the hype and find those real gems.
I'm happy to. And you know, it's interesting. This year feels different. We've got these massive blockbusters, but then also some really unique under-the-radar hits.
Totally. It's kind of like a strange mix.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, like, what's really capturing the public's imagination these days? What does it say about where we are culturally right now?
Okay, so many questions. Where do we even begin with all this?
Good question.
Well, how about movies? Vulture's Best Movies of 2024 list really caught my eye. They talked about how we saw movie stars being movie stars this year.
Right, like really embracing that star power. I think that's a great point. And we've seen this trend of actors taking on roles that really challenge them.
Yeah, pushing those boundaries.
Exactly. And not just big names. You know, it's about witnessing talent shine in unexpected ways.
Like Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt in The Fall Guy. I mean, that movie was pure fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Their chemistry was just electric, and the stunts were incredible. It felt like a modern take on those classic Hollywood action comedies. That just oozes charm.
Absolutely. And that sense of nostalgia for classic Hollywood, you're right, it really seems to be resonating with audiences. But on the other end of the spectrum, you've got a film like Nickel Boys.
Oh, yeah, I read about that one.
Deeply personal film directed by Ramel Ross, adapted from Colson Whitehead's novel.
Powerful book.
It is.
And the movie sounds incredibly moving, but maybe a little heavy, too.
It is heavy stuff.
Yeah. It's about those two young black men navigating that brutal reality of a reform school in the Jim Crow South.
Right. That's right.
And Ross uses some really interesting camera techniques to bring the viewer right into that experience.
Yeah, it's powerful filmmaking. And Nickel Boys isn't alone. You've got films like Green Border, which tackles the refugee crisis in Eastern Europe.
Wow.
Cinema can be a platform for addressing these really difficult but crucial social issues. It seems audiences are hungry for stories that go beyond pure entertainment.
Definitely seems to be making a statement. Wow. It's a lot to think about. Not everything has to be so serious, though, right? I mean, the new Wallace and Gromit movie was pure delight. Sometimes you just need a good dose of good old-fashioned fun.
Oh, absolutely. And what's fascinating is how animation, while it's often seen as family entertainment, can tackle complex themes just as effectively as any other genre.
You're so right, like Robot Dreams, right?
Robot Dreams, yes. Exploring those themes of connection and isolation in that ever-evolving city backdrop. I mean, it's amazing what they can do with animation these days.
Yeah. It really is. Okay, so we've got these thought-provoking films making waves. Classic Hollywood charm making a comeback. Animation proving it can be more than just lighthearted fun. What about what people were choosing to watch at home? Streaming and all that.
Yeah, well, Forbes released their list of the most popular Netflix movies, and a few things jumped out at me.
Like what?
Well, like the fact that Super Mario Bros.
Yeah.
Dominated the list. My kids definitely contributed to those numbers, I'm sure.
Haha. Mine too. I mean, it seems like nostalgia and big-name franchises still have a powerful pull, especially for family viewing.
They do, but here's where it gets interesting. Topping the non-animated list was Rebel Ridge.
Rebel Ridge, I haven't even heard of that one.
It's directed by Jeremy Saulnier.
Okay.
He's known for his gritty, slow-burn thrillers like Green Room. This one stars Aaron Pierre, and it's basically a deep dive into corruption and violence. Not your typical popcorn flick.
Definitely not.
And its popularity on Netflix suggests that maybe audiences are craving something more than just escapism, even in their home viewing.
That's a really good point. It makes you wonder what's driving those choices, right? Is it a need for more depth? A desire to grapple with real-world issues? Maybe a little bit of both. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about TV. What's been happening on the small screen? Vulture's list of the best TV shows of the year had some interesting picks, and I noticed a lot of them were later seasons of already established shows.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of returning favorites. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it seems like building a loyal audience over time might be the key to success these days. It's not just about those flashy new premieres anymore.
Right. And one show that exemplifies that is Somebody Somewhere. Season 3 was phenomenal. Such a heartwarming show about chosen family and finding your place in the world. It's almost like an antidote to all the cynicism and darkness we see so much of on TV.
I see what you mean. But wouldn't you say there's a risk of shows like that becoming a bit too saccharine? Where's the line between heartwarming and overly sentimental?
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe it is about finding that balance. Speaking of shows that kept us on the edge of our seats, though, Evil also had its final season this year. I loved how it blended supernatural thrills with these really thought-provoking explorations of faith and doubt, the nature of good and evil. It was a wild ride. I'm going to miss those characters.
Yeah, it was a good one. What's interesting is that both Somebody Somewhere and Evil, despite their totally different tones and genres, they both ultimately explore the complexities of human relationships.
Yeah, they do. One through a lens of warmth and support, the other through a darker, more psychological thriller approach.
Right. But at the core, it's all about those human connections.
And then there's Shogun. Oh my gosh, I was completely captivated by this one. A sweeping historical drama based on James Clavell's novel about an English sailor who finds himself shipwrecked in feudal Japan. I mean, it sounds kind of challenging for modern audiences, right, with the subtitles and the cultural context, but it was a huge hit. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a beautifully crafted show. I mean, the costumes, the set design, the cinematography, everything is top-notch.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think its popularity speaks to this desire for more demanding, immersive storytelling. Maybe audiences are yearning for shows that transport them to another time and place, challenge them intellectually and emotionally.
It's definitely a different kind of viewing experience.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to music. It's interesting, right? Both Rolling Stone and Vulture had Taylor Swift on their best album lists. PUT for different albums.
Right.
She released like this massive anthology of her work, A&D, a re-recording of 1989. So what do you think about that? About her staying power, especially in a year packed with so many new artists?
I think it really speaks to her impact, on the music industry.
Right.
And her ability to constantly evolve as an artist. I mean, releasing both a career-spanning anthology and a re-recorded album, it shows she really understands her fan base and how to keep them engaged.
Right. It's not just churning out new music.
Exactly. It's about crafting an experience.
And speaking of pop stars, Sabrina Carpenter had like the song of the summer with Espresso. Do you think that means she's the next pop queen?
Espresso is definitely catchy and clever, but what I find really interesting is that thread of humor and self-awareness.
Yeah.
It feels like a trend, A lot of pop stars are embracing that, and it's resonating with listeners. But you know what I think is truly exciting?
Yeah.
The global influence we're seeing
Oh, yeah.
on the music scene.
Totally. Like Rima, he was all over Spotify's global list with his Afro rave style.
Exactly. And I think this points to a larger movement. Genres are blending, artists are refusing to be pigeonholed, and the result is this incredible fusion of sounds and styles.
It's really cool. So maybe music in 2024 was all about breaking boundaries and embracing global influences. But what about books? I noticed that the New York Times and Vulture's best books lists were pretty different this year. Why do you think that is?
That's a great observation. I think it reflects the different criteria they use, The Times focuses on literary merit, critical acclaim, while Vulture leans towards books that are generating buzz-spurking conversations. It makes for an interesting comparison.
It does. The Times had this big James Baldwin biography on their list, which I'm really interested in. I'm always up for learning more about cultural icons.
It's a fantastic biography, and it actually fits into a larger trend we've been seeing, of historical reexamination. There's this renewed interest in understanding the past, especially figures like Baldwin and Reagan, how their legacies continue to shape us today.
Yeah, and then Vulture had this novel by Percival Everett that like reimagines Moby Dick.
Oh, wow.
I just love a creative reimagining of a classic.
Me too. And it speaks to the enduring power of those classic narratives. But it also highlights how contemporary authors are finding new ways to engage with them, making them relevant to modern readers. It's about breathing new life into those familiar stories. So what stood out to you from all these best of picks? What are you most curious about?
Wow, that is a tough question. There's so much. I'm really drawn to the films that are pushing boundaries and tackling those difficult social issues like Nickel Boys and Green Border. And I'm always fascinated by shows that subvert expectations, like Shogun, with its complex storyline and historical setting. And musically, I'm still vibing to Rima's Afro rave beats. What about you?
Ooh, that's a great list. I'm with you on those boundary-pushing films and those shows that challenge our expectations. But I gotta admit, I keep coming back to Somebody Somewhere. It's just so beautifully written and acted, and it fills me with this sense of hope and warmth. It's like a big cozy hug in TV form, but without being too saccharine.
I know exactly what you mean. So for our listeners out there, what stood out to you from all these best of picks? What are you adding to your watch list, your playlist, your reading list?
It's really cool to see how passionate people get about these lists. Even if you don't agree with every single pick, they spark these great conversations, expose you to new artists, new ideas, and maybe even push you to step outside your comfort zone a little.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about keeping that curiosity alive, right? I think
Right.
that's the real takeaway from all this best of frenzy. It's not just about passively consuming, it's about actively exploring and discovering those hidden gems that really resonate with you on a personal level.
I love that. And you know what, to really drive that point home? How about a challenge for our listeners?
Okay, I like a challenge.
Pick one thing from everything we've talked about today, a movie, a song, a show, a book, and dive deeper into it. Don't just watch, listen, or read passively. Really engage with it. Ask yourself, what were the creators trying to say? How does it connect to the wider cultural landscape? And most importantly, what does it mean to you?
Ooh, I love that challenge. It's the perfect way to wrap up this deep dive into the year's best in pop culture. We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully we've sparked some curiosity and given you a starting point for your own explorations.
There's so much out there to discover.
So until our next deep dive, happy exploring.